Welcome back in, everybody, to Pro Football Plus. It is a privilege to have you all on board. I'm Ben Parker, joined once again by Shane Ratliff. Youssef, unfortunately, is out this week. Austin is out. They are busy with other things. We look forward to having them back, but we are so glad to have you here with us tonight. We're going to talk Chris Jones and some chicken fraud tonight. We're going to talk AFC predictions. We're going to go through several of our division winners, our wild cards, our Super Bowl analysis, all of it tonight. So thank you for being here with us. Shane, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing well.
All right. Tell me what the weather's like up there. We're getting out of summer and into fall. I don't know where you guys are in that range right now.
I mean, for you guys, I'm deep in fall. For
Okay.
everybody in the Northeast, this has actually had a little bit of a downturn this week. So it's starting to get a little cooler. And we had a lot of rain the last couple of days. So
we down here in the deep south, we're kind of deep south, mid south. How about that? It's starting to feel good after dark, after the sun sets and before the sun gets up. It's still blazing hot in the middle of the day. Like we're hitting 92, 93 with humidity, but it feels great at night. So, we'll take what we can get down here in the mid south, man. All right, let's get right to it. I'm going to read off a bit of a story here that was just too tempting for me to pass up, man. The Chris Jones chicken fraud story here. I love it. This is right up my alley. So there is a lady named Vera Liddell from the state of Illinois, the good old state of Illinois. She had worked in the school district up there, and apparently she had been convicted of or pled guilty to stealing, confiscating, defrauding the state of Illinois of over $1 million worth of chicken wings. Now, besides being illegal, which is the obvious part, to make this a little bit layer worse, these chicken wings were apparently designated for impoverished kids or needy kids during the COVID crisis. So this apparently happened back during 2020, 21, somewhere right in there was when a lot of this happened. 11,000 boxes of chicken is what I'm reading off the articles. I mean, so this wasn't quick and easy. There was a lot going on here. She got, I think, 9 years. I don't know necessarily she would serve all 9, but she got 9 years. Chris Jones of the Kansas City Chiefs heard about it and apparently got on X Twitter and said, hey, I'll cover the losses here. I'll take care of this so she doesn't have to go to jail. And at the moment, there is a lot of talk between a lot of lawyers and judges in the state of Illinois about this lady who, from everybody who's willing to speak out about her, other than stealing over $1 million worth of chicken, appears to have been a good lady for the large majority of her life. She's in her late 60s now. She was in her mid 60s when all this chicken thing was going on. So, Shane, I want to get your first reaction when you heard this story. I think it's got at least 3 different sides to it, but where are you starting at, man?
Well, I think in the very beginning when the story first broke, I thought it was interesting that Chris Jones was like, I'm going to put up the 1.5 million. I'll cover the debt. And then people started doing more digging, and what she was doing was over ordering, then taking those wings and selling them for profit. And what's come out lately is that was to cover a gambling. So, I mean, I think, like, does 9 years in prison going to affect her where she won't do it again? I mean, I only think negative will come out of her doing that time. Do I think she has to do something to pay that back? Do I think jail time's the best? I don't. The other thing from Chris Jones, like, I mean, this is a criminal thing. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't, where she just got caught up. I mean, she did break the law. And I think it hurts even more when, like you said, where this food was designated for. It's not like she was taking it out of one of the NFL team's kitchens. She was taking it out of a school district that needed this food, especially during a challenging time. So I think as more information comes out, it starts to look worse and worse.
It really does. And that's not unusual, right? I mean, politicians do this crap all the time. And people and corporations do this all the time. And the deeper listen, that's why a lot of them settle so quickly or get the high priced lawyers, is so there's not a lot of digging, because the deeper you dig, the more you find, right? That's so unusual. I mean, so normal here for so many of these cases that are similar to in any way to something like this. I'm going to start off on the sweet side here. Chris Jones has one of the bigger hearts of anybody you'll meet in the NFL. He really does. This was true even before this. You could see it as you study him over the years, some of the things he's done, the things he said. He's really got a big heart, and that's what's at play here for Chris, is why he might be willing to put up $1.5 million, dollars. He's rich, he can cover it, but still to be willing to do that, he's just got a very big heart. So hats off to Chris Jones for wanting to help out somebody here. The funny side to me is 11,000 boxes, man. I don't know how she did that. The funny logistics of it make me want to imagine her after school going around and carting 1,000 boxes a day, putting them in a box truck and sending them off to whoever bought them, right? I don't think that's what happened. Still, excuse me. That's the funny part to me is, good gosh, how did this lady, for whatever period of time, a year and a half, 2 years, I don't know, how did she get $11,000 boxes moved around to wherever she moved them around to? It may be listen, a lot of that business was transacted over the internet, and it went from one warehouse to the other. Is probably what happened. But still, that 11,000 box, fraud going on here struck me as very, very funny. And then you get back to the serious side of it. This lady, and listen, maybe she has been a good lady. Maybe she's helped a lot of school kids during her time. But at some point in time, I don't know when the gambling started. If that's been going on for decades for her, if it's just started recently. At some point, she made a choice. And that choice was, I need those chicken wings more than the kids do. And I need that money more than the state of Illinois does or the school district does. And so that's a pretty big deal, especially at this dollar amount. That's what's really kicking in here. This isn't $20,000 worth, which would be big enough, right? It's $1.2 million, $1.5 million worth of stuff going on here, and that's what's got to the large jail time. And it would take lawyers getting involved, and it would take judges making exceptions for this to not happen, for her to not spend whatever she ends up spending out of that 9 months in jail. But Chris Jones is apparently trying. This appears to be a legit thing that he's doing here.
Yeah, her attorney said that Chris Jones reached directly out to say, I got you. Yeah. Like you're saying, like this is not him just spouting off on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now, but he's legitimately trying to make this move to help people. So like I said, I don't know if you want to be behind. I think the important part is, like you said, we talked about before, like Shohei Ohtani with the gambling, like $1.5 million is a lot of money to run up as a gambling debt. That's not, like playing a pony every once in a while. That's some serious gambling that's going on there.
It amuses me. I would probably take this a lot more seriously, and Chris Jones probably would too if there had been a violent crime involved here. But it's serious enough when you are thinking about this was designated for kids, and this was taken out, a large amount of money was taken out of the school district. So we'll see what happens with it. But the story itself was fascinating to me, and I just couldn't pass that one up. So let's do our AFC predictions. Shane, are you ready, man?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm going to do a quick check here, and I apologize for the tech check and for my coughing tonight. I'll try to wing some of that out of here. Shane, can you see my screen? The audience should be able to as well.
Yep.
All right. So we've got Shane's picks pulled up here. Shane, walk me through your division winners, and as you tell me a division winner, tell me what seed they got as well.
Okay. So we'll start with the East. So I went with the Dolphins on this one, and I actually have them ending up as the 4 seed, so the lower of the winners of the division. Then in the North, I have the Bengals. I have them as a 2 seed. For the South, I have the Texans. I have them as a number 1 seed.
All right.
I think with everything we've talked about, they're gonna be a dangerous team this year. And then out West, until somebody knocks them off, I went with the Chiefs, and they're sitting at 3.
So let's talk about Houston real quick, because I'm hearing a lot of people say that even though they like Houston, they're kind of expecting kind of that sophomore slump, if you will, that step back, which we've seen from a lot of teams over the years, right? We've seen teams do that. Teams that look like they were on the upshot kind of take a little dip before they really take off again. I didn't put Houston number one, I'll tell you that, but I'm not expecting a step back either myself.
I I mean, I don't if they can take a step back, that's true. I think they've added pieces. I don't think they really lost anything. The other thing is, Jacksonville is still a mess. Tennessee is starting over again. And the Colts, I mean, if Richardson stays healthy and they can run what they want to do, I think they can be dangerous. But if not, there's no one inside your division that's scary. So if you clean up in your division, and I look at, you look at the North, uh, other than Pittsburgh right now, all those teams are dangerous.
Mhm.
You look in the West. If it's not Kansas City that's made it this last time, like, do I think the Chargers are going to be better? Yes. Do I think Denver will be better? Yes, they have to be. And the same thing for the Raiders. It's so for me, I took the Texans because I think they're going to have the easiest on the division run, and I think some of these other teams are going to get beaten up throughout the season. Just to where it's not that they may not be the better team, but record wise, I think the Texans will pull through.
I'm not expecting Houston to go anywhere. I just don't see them taking a dip other than the obvious injury thing. I mean, the coach is not going to get worse. The quarterback, I don't think. I mean, Stroud might throw a couple more interceptions this year, but I don't expect his production to drop off at all. And you mentioned that they actually made moves to make the team better, not worse. So they didn't
Mm-hmm.
lose anybody significant that's going to shake that out. So I did not put Houston number one, but I've got them. I've got them going on. I said I was going to wait on this, Shane, but let's go ahead and walk everybody through Yusef's picks because he was kind enough to send them in, and everybody's going to see them as I zip through anyway. So let's just go ahead and walk everybody through what Yusef picked out here on the AFC side, and he'll be back with us next week. He's got the Kansas City Chiefs winning the whole AFC side, so no surprise there. And he likes them to go up against the Bengals. Like Yusef is a little bit higher on the Bengals right now than some people are, although almost everybody says, hey, Bengals or Ravens coming out of that North Division. And whoever does have the better year is probably in the AFC title game, a good chance. But he's got the Cincinnati Bengals there. And then I'm going to not go through these matchups here, but this is his first round, basically. He's got the Jets making the playoffs. He's got the Dolphins actually winning that division, just like you. He's got it looks like he's got Buffalo actually missing the playoffs, which I didn't notice when I put this together. But if I'm reading his notes right, Buffalo missing the playoffs. AFC's so tough, man. Cleveland missing the playoffs for him. Chargers in looks like, and then the Ravens getting in and getting to the second round, getting knocked out by the Chiefs. As you look at Yusef's standings here, anything else jump out at you?
No, I mean, in all honesty, we're pretty close, but uh I mean, I've mentioned my love for Harbaugh before, but Yusuf is a Michigan man, so he thinks that he's going to be able to turn the Chargers around. Uh, I think they're going to be close, but I don't think they're going to make it. But I mean, the only change on mine when we get back to mine is going to be I do have the Bills sneaking in as the lowest seed on mine because uh, you know, I think it's what the Bills do. Like I think once the playoffs come, it's going to be problems, but I think they'll get there far enough.
Fair enough. And we appreciate Yusef sending it in. He'll be back with us next week. The AFC is tough. The NFC that we did last week was fairly easy for us to figure out what we wanted to have happen. The AFC was very tough. We'll talk about some of the teams that were hard to leave out at the end of the episode, but that's what Yusef's got going on. I'm going to drop down here to my picks. So I've got Kansas City, number one seed overall, obviously winning the division. And then for my number two seed, I've got the Ravens. I expect the Ravens to come back strong. They've always been good. It kind of sort of felt like they stabilized last year, like they figured out what they really wanted to do with Lamar. And so I expect them to win the division, but I've got Cincinnati as the number one wild card, just right behind them. And I mean just a few centimeters behind them. All right. I mean, really, really close between Cincinnati and Baltimore. And then in the matchup against Baltimore, I've got the Chargers in the playoffs. I'm hearing a number of people who are kind of thinking Chargers out because of a crowded AFC field and because that Chargers roster has a couple of holes. All fair, and that all may happen. But I feel like Harbaugh is starting in a much better place here with the Chargers than when he started with the 49ers. a decade or so ago. It's been a long time now, but that roster wasn't anywhere near as good. Didn't have anywhere near the quarterback play. Didn't have anywhere near some of the highlight players that this Chargers roster has. And it didn't take Harbaugh long with the 49ers to get him in gear. So I think he's got a good starting spot here. And just believing that he is a good coach, I've got the Chargers coming in at the 7th spot, just barely getting in. For me, I've got the Buffalo Bills winning their division. This was tough. The AFC East was tough. But for Buffalo, I just don't think they're going anywhere. They've still got the coaching staff. They've still got Josh Allen. They still have a lot of good pieces on this roster, even though we saw several of them lead this offseason. I just don't think they're going anywhere. So I've got them in as the 4 seed, winning that division, but not dominating. You mentioned the playoffs, not dominating there. Houston winning that division, I've got them as the 3 seed. So winning that division and being the 3. And then I've got the Jets in the playoffs. Lo and behold, not a lot of people have this. It's kind of 50-50 on who's got the Jets in and who doesn't. We'll see about you in a second. I've got the Jets in the playoffs. The defense is dominant. I mean, it really, from my angle, it really is dominant. I expect at least league average play out of Aaron Rodgers, if not better. So I think this is the playoff team from where I'm sitting. And I've got them just maybe a half step behind Buffalo. So that's where I'm at. Anything jump out here to you from this so far?
No, I mean, like you said, but you'll see. I'm pretty close to both you and Yusuf on these picks. It's the Chargers is the one real change, but like I said, I've been behind Harbaugh before, and I think the number one thing that he does, and you mentioned it, like, yes, he can turn talent around, but he's one of those old school coaches that he goes into every little increment of what you do. So when you start to eliminate more and more mistakes, the Chargers lost a bunch of games by close margin. So if you just turn a couple of those games around, now all of a sudden you get some momentum. That's what he did in San Francisco. They played solid defense. He got Alex Smith to run an offense the way that he wanted to. They picked and dinked and dunked and got things working. And then when Kaepernick went in, he had Greg Roman completely change the offense. That's what he does. He's gonna push his team that fits the best for his players. He's not egotistical about that, but the big thing for him is if he's got a run game and a defense, he's going to make it real hard on teams. So, yeah, like I said, I don't think it's this year they make the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're right neck and neck with some people.
Jim Harbaugh, you mentioned it, his flexibility, because you don't always think of that when you think of old school hard knocks football, right? Those coaches, but the best ones flex. They don't change everything that they do, but where they need to fit the personnel, because they want to win, they flex, they change. They do that. We see it in basketball, we see it in baseball, we see it especially in football. The best ones change when they have to, either because the game is changing or because their personnel is changing. You have to do that if you want to keep winning. The best ones do, and yet the things that don't change are we're going to be physical, we're going to be technique smart, we're going to block well, even if you're not even in on the play. You're going to block well, or you're not going to be on the field. And we're going to put everybody in good positions. We're not going to ask you to do something that's weird for you or that you really aren't good at doing. So, we're going to make these players better than they really are, essentially. And that's just good coaching. So yeah, I fully expect Harbaugh to be able to do all of that right away. But we'll see if that cashes in as a playoff spot. All right, we're coming back to you now. Give us your 3 wild cards and their seeds.
So my first wild card is the Ravens. I have them as a 5th seed. And then, like you said, I think the East is going to be a neck and neck battle. So I actually picked both the Jets and the Bills to make it in. So I picked the Jets as the 6th and the Bills as the 7th. Like I said, that's heavy East, but I think the Patriots, and it hurts me to say, are going to be absolutely terrible this year. So if you catch the victory off of that, and then you battle amongst these other teams, I think this is going to be a down year record-wise for a lot of teams. I think there's going to be a lot of middle of the pack. So the ones that really extend, they'll win the divisions, and then I think the wild card is going to come down to end of season legitimately. Where If you win on a Monday, then that eliminates 3 other teams, and if you lose, then there's 7 other options of who could be in on that next day. Um, I think it's real tight, and the reason why the Jets were hard, like you said, solid defensively, and I mean, if Aaron Rodgers plays a full season, even if it's the worst season he's ever
Yeah.
had, he's just multiplied what the quarterback position for the Jets has done
Yes,
over the
he has.
last 10 years. So, you know, yeah, he'll shoot it right up there. So if that happens, it's the same thing. The one that I worried the most over putting in there, and that's why they got the lowest seed for me, is the Bills. Um, Injuries at running back are starting to pile up. They made a decision to let all their wide receivers go, basically. Um, and when your quarterback is your number one star and you're not giving them weapons, yeah, you have 2 great tight ends, but unless you're going to flex them out whole time and really have them play wide receiver, you're going to be in trouble. And you right now can't run the ball. The best running back you have probably is, again, Allen, and you don't want him taking a beating like he has in the years past.
That's what bothers me. And statistically, I don't know how much this truly holds up, but I think this is one thing that's bothered me about Buffalo over the past couple of seasons is they don't seem devoted to the running game. They seem perfectly happy to let Allen kind of be the point guard and the shooter at the same time, which I get it. He's a magician, right? What can't he do? I get that, but still, you're allowing defenses to just make their focal point completely Josh Allen. Defenses really don't have to worry about much of anything else except for Diggs deep, and now Diggs is gone. So, I really do like that running game just because it punches defenses up the middle and forces them to look at something besides Josh Allen.
Well, I think that's where when we talk about, best coaches in the league, we don't always get a time to talk about what assistant coaches can affect, especially your coordinators. Brian Dable moves on, takes a job with the Giants.
Yeah.
When he was there was better mix. You have Ken
Right.
Dorsey step in, there's no mix. They get rid of Ken Dorsey. They bring in Joe Brady, who was the quarterback coach, and he basically went to Allen and said, "What do you like?" And then Allen said, "These are the plays I like to run. This is what we're going to do." And Joe Brady built the offense around that. It's the same thing he did when he was with Joe Burrow at LSU. You have to play to your talent, but in the NFL, you can't just throw the ball. It can't be the only way around. It's been proven time and time again. You'll bring an offensive coordinator up from college that's thrown for 1,000 yards, and then he gets the NFL and it just doesn't work out. Washington's gonna run it again and see if that offense can work for them, but you have to have a running game in the NFL.
I agree, and I listen for any analytics person out there who wants to say, "Hey, we're better with the ball in Allen's hands." I understand that, but what I'm seeing is when these Bills teams run up against the better teams, they're struggling, and a part of that is because these better defenses and better teams can just focus on Josh Allen. I mean, that's the key. We don't have anything else to worry about. So, don't necessarily see that changing this year because of the running back injuries and the lack of a wide receiver depth working there. So we'll see about Buffalo. Go ahead and walk me through your matchups. The Bengals and the Bills, first of all.
So I had the Bengals over the Bills. Like I said, I think the Bills are going to get to the playoffs, but I think the Bengals will make an easy run over this. I put Kansas City over the Jets. And then in one of the games that I think will be the tightest is going to be Ravens over the Dolphins.
Talk to me about Ravens versus Dolphins and that potential matchup.
I think the thing is the Dolphins have been so injury prone towards the end of the year that you don't get to see the same Dolphins team that reels off victories in the very beginning. The other thing, like Ravens play great defense. They are 100% going to run the ball this year. And when you get into the playoffs, if you have, when we were talking before about like weakest, the defensive line, if they're healthy in Miami, is talented. If they're on like their third string defensive ends like they were last year, they're going to get eaten up. And like I said, I think that's the thing. The Ravens eliminate mistakes, and I think their young defense is getting better and better. they'll again have to change, move some coordinators around. That's what you do. And the Ravens, you just ship a defensive coordinator to another team and pull somebody up. But they're always going to attack. They're always going to play sound defense. So I think that will crush the Dolphins once it gets to the playoffs.
That's the feeling I've got as well here with Miami. And again, I don't mean to disrespect Miami. I like what they're doing on offense. I love their coach. It just seems like at a certain point they hit walls and they run out of gas. And the question is, does that happen at the end of the regular season, or does that happen somewhere in the early rounds of the playoffs? Seems to be general consensus on Miami until they prove us otherwise. Now, before we get over to mine, I want to talk about this matchup right here real quick. You have the Ravens versus the Texans. I haven't seen many playoff scenarios, because we run them through from hardly anybody that doesn't at some point have the Ravens running into Houston again in this year's playoffs. It just seems to be the way the seedings are working that these two teams are almost destined to meet again in the playoffs. You obviously feel the same way. Go ahead and give us your winner out of that matchup.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this time, like I said, I'm going heavy on the Texans this year. I do think that they're going to be able to pull it through. So I picked the Texans over the Ravens, but I think that's going to be another extremely close game. It'll be interesting to see what the Texans do against a team like Baltimore. Like last year, they flew out of the gates in the playoffs where there's no way people expected them to jump offensively and get over that type of total. But the Ravens are going to try to slow that game down. So the question now becomes, is bringing in Joe Mixon and bringing in some of these other weapons, going to get Diggs as a wide receiver, how are you going to be able to manipulate that offense to try to help your defense? That's going to be the big thing for me. I think as you go along, the other thing for them is to get to have home field advantage. I think that helps them because if you have to play Baltimore in Baltimore, that makes it more difficult. I wouldn't want to be in that situation for them. So I think that's really what it breaks down to. But like you said, Ben, when I was doing research on this, there are thousands of people out there that during their predictions, you see that whether it depends on how high you had the Ravens or how low you had the Texans,
Right.
a ton of people have them playing at some point in the playoffs.
Yeah, it just seems to be, and again, I think that's NFL math working. It just seems to be what's kicking in here. That's what I'm expecting is somewhere these two teams to hit each other in the playoffs. I am concerned about because I'm in love with Houston. I'm in love with almost everything they're doing and where they're going. I think they are going way up. My concern for Houston is how will they be able to handle that Baltimore kind of bully ball because we know they do it so well with Derrick Henry there, with the fullback there, with a pretty good offensive line, especially over at the tackle spots. How will they be able to do that? But at a certain point, there are just some teams, and I'm not sure Houston isn't one of those teams, where matchups are not. The talent and the synergy that Houston seems to have just becomes so overwhelming. They just win anyway. Like they just figure it out, they hook it up. So I'm curious to see if this is the year that Houston does that, because I think that's coming. I think the time is coming where DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud and all that young talent on defense is just too overwhelming. Matchups be darned, right? I mean, that's we'll see if that happens this year or not. I'm going to scroll on down to mine. We'll come back to yours in just a minute. Walk through my matchups as well. I've got Houston versus the New York Jets. I'm going to have the Houston Texans winning that because I already mentioned to y'all that I'm in love with Houston as well and what they're doing and where they're going. The Ravens versus the Chargers, I just do not see. I love Harbaugh, and I think he's going to do good things there. And even though I put them in the playoffs, I just don't see how they're going to show up in Baltimore and beat that Ravens team in the first round of the playoffs. I just don't see that happening. So I've got the Ravens winning that one kind of comfortably. This is interesting because I actually have Buffalo winning the division going up against Cincinnati. But to me, Cincinnati is a way better team. So even though Cincinnati would have to go to Buffalo and show it, they've done it before. Cincinnati and Joe Burrow and Kansas City seems to be a couple of the teams that they don't necessarily have to be at home to do it. So I've got Cincinnati winning that game. Probably a fun game, but I just see that as a game that Cincinnati kind of controls throughout. They don't run Buffalo out of the building, but I've got Cincinnati winning that. So I've actually got the same matchups you've got. We got there by different ways, but I've got the exact same matchups here. For me, I'm going to put Baltimore in over Houston, but that's a close one. That is really close. So I've got Baltimore in the finals once again. It would not surprise me at all if Houston wins that because I'm sky high on Houston here. It's just a matter of when that happens. And then I'm just not going to pick Kansas City to lose at home against Cincinnati, even though Joe Burrow is perfectly capable. There's no question about it. I've got Kansas City winning that one as well. So I'm going to talk about my AFC matchup here, and then we'll come back to you. Chiefs versus Ravens. If Baltimore couldn't do it last year in Baltimore, I'm not real sure why they're going to be able to do it this year in Kansas City. So I've got Kansas City winning this thing. I tell you what's hurting a lot of teams here, and I don't mean to beat dead horses, but I'm good at that, so that's what I'll do. We've got so many teams with decent quarterbacks or very good quarterbacks who are being paid significantly more than Patrick Mahomes is being paid. You are now making it actually easier every year for the Chiefs to just keep right on winning because their percent of cap that's occupied by one of, if not the best quarterback in football, is smaller than what everybody else is investing in lesser quarterbacks. You're opening the door wide up for Kansas City to just keep doing this again year after year. The one kryptonite to that kind of magic is Houston and C.J. Stroud and a rookie contract in which you're paying Stroud very little. You're able to spread that money all the way around the roster. So it opens the door wide up for teams like Houston to come crashing through. That's what we'll find out next year. I've got the Chiefs in all the way. So let's come back here to you. You got the same matchup, Bengals versus Chiefs.
I went with the Chiefs as well, Ben. I think exactly like you mentioned, Mahomes, it's kind of right out of the Tom Brady playbook where you sign a team-friendly contract, but you're guaranteed the money. Like it's not for Mahomes, he signed like a bunch on a signing bonus, and in the Patriots way, what they would do was make Tom Brady had to have like 10 completions and then he got 40 million. There's ways around each of those things. And like you said, if you're not spending the largest chunk on your quarterback, you can go out and pick and choose on what you're doing. I think the other thing Kansas City's done lately, though, is that they've done a good job in the draft by getting at least one of their draft picks late in those to be able to pop. Is that going to be somebody like an undrafted guy? Is Carson Steele going to be able to be an offensive weapon for them? It seems like a lot of Kansas City people are behind him. The other thing is for the Bengals, my worry for both the Bengals and Kansas City is I have an all-star quarterback. I'm not doing a great job of protecting him. Kansas City tried to make that move this year to shore that up. We'll see how that turns out. But I think Kansas City, until someone really steps up and can fulfill offensively, because I think the thing is if you give Mahomes the ball late in the game, you're in trouble. He's going to pull something out. Like I trust him to get me 7 points when I need it.
I do too. And listen, ever since Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher left the Chiefs, or the Chiefs let them both go, Kansas City's been struggling to look for those two tackle spots. The interior is good, but the tackle spots are weak, and that's been decreasing Mahomes' throwing time for the past 3 seasons now. He just doesn't have the time to launch deep, which is his strength, right? His ability to launch 50, 60 yards, hit guys downfield. He does not have the time to keep doing that. They'll keep working on it, though. We'll see what they can come out with. All right. The Houston Texans that you and I both love, you got them going farther. Do you actually have them beating Kansas City here?
I actually do, Ben. I went for the shot because I think Kansas City is going to get beat up this year. Not really any problem of their own. It seems like they're doing a great job of, the Raiders rookie shows Kermit the Frog. That gets Mahomes another chip on his shoulder. People are talking about, is Kansas City going to be as strong as they are? What are they doing? And I think Andy Reid does a good job of turning those things where it's us against the world, even though you're the 2-time reigning, champion. The thing for me, though, is I think if Mahomes gets hurt, which has lately been happening in these championship rounds, I think the Texans can do things to keep the ball away from him. Like I said, If it comes to the end, I trust for him to get me 7 points. But if we're 2 touchdowns up and I can play some coverage and not let him get the ball back, that's what I'm going to do. And I think D'Amico Ryans has learned that before. You know, he was defensive coordinator for San Francisco. He saw exactly how that ended up working out for him before. And I think he's going to come with a playbook that's going to try to put as much pressure on Mahomes as possible. Like I said, if the Texans fall flat, then I have a terrible pull on this. But if they show up, I think they are going to be a difficult team to beat this year.
There's no reason to doubt that Houston can do this. It is well within Houston's ball range to go all the way to the Super Bowl and win it. That's well within. They are one of the teams who can do that. There's no reason to think. And even though I didn't put them that far, that's right within their wheelhouse to be able to do. And you're right about Kansas City. Depth is an issue. That's part of having a large contract. Anytime you've got a large quarterback contract, your depth goes away, which means some of your starters aren't going to be as good. And then the depth behind them isn't going to be as good. So if you're rooting against Kansas City, if you're looking for reason to hope against them, their offensive line depth is very small. It's better than it has been the past couple of seasons, but still it's not great. Linebacker depth, they've got 3 guys who can play. After that, it's a huge cavernous drop-off. And then you kind of sort of hope, if you're rooting against the Chiefs, that this loss of L'Jarius Sneed in the secondary creates another 500 snaps of playing time for other people who can't handle it as good as Sneed can handle it. So those are the things that you're hoping for if you're rooting against Kansas City. Real quick, while I scroll down to my screen, you've got Houston versus the 49ers from last week, I believe. Who wins that and what?
See, I went for the 49ers, but like you said, I see this as the Shanahan tree coming back together again. You know, D'Amico was probably the best defensive coordinator they had. He rose up through that system. Shanahan had him there. I think San Francisco, if they can stay healthy, which, you know, that's really the story for everybody in the NFL. But I think Brock Purdy is cutting down on mistakes. I think they have an offense that routinely scores points for them. I think the defense will come back. And really, like you said, when you're talking kryptonite, the only team that's been able to beat them is Kansas City. So if I eliminate Kansas City, then I think the 49ers. I also think, you know, whatever you want to talk about jinxes and other, you know, voodoo, I think McCaffrey is going to have another outstanding year. And if he becomes the lone weapon for them and they can protect him, you know, I don't think they have anybody else that matches up. And that's why I would pick the 49ers if we're going match a match. I actually have the 49ers, even if I said Kansas City was. I think this is the year they put it together.
All right, and I had the 49ers coming in from the NFC side last week as well. I've got them going up against Kansas City. I think it's another close one, but I'm going to give Kansas City their 3rd Super Bowl win in a row. That's on the table. A lot of these teams can't find a quarterback as good as Mahomes. I get that. But when you're paying these quarterbacks so much money, more than Mahomes, you're now at a double whammy. And then you add a third one in which a lot of these coaches just aren't as good as Andy Reid. So now the Chiefs have 3 major advantages on you before you even ever started to build the rest of the roster. You know, in some cases, Kansas City has beaten teams there as well. So I've got Kansas City winning their 3rd straight Super Bowl. But if you're San Francisco, if you are Houston, if you're Cincinnati, if you're Baltimore, if you're a number of, I think, probably 8 teams, you've got every right to think that you can win the Super Bowl, you know, and forget Mahomes and Kansas City. They can all go jump in the lake. You can win the Super Bowl. So looks like it's going to be a fun year, even though I've got Kansas City coming out on top myself. One final thing before we shut this down, Shane. If I'm looking at this right, you left the Browns out, the Jaguars out, the Colts out, the Chargers out. Mm-hmm. Which one of those 4 teams or another team that I didn't mention was the toughest for you to leave out of the playoffs entirely? Who's the closest there?
I actually thought that the Colts would be the most dangerous for me, because I think if Richardson comes back, I think that they can be dangerous. The reason why I went without Cleveland, great defense. I don't think Watson was the answer before, and I think that showed that team, you know, Falco didn't help them once it got to the playoffs because he's just not the same thing. But right. He helped to lead that team. From what I've seen, it doesn't seem like a lot of teams get behind Watson. Of course, there's a myriad of reasons that we could get into why that's a possibility. But I think if the Colts stay, if Richardson can play, they have strong wide receivers, they have a great offensive line. Taylor is an outstanding running back. If you can build up some points, again, it's the same thing. And like I said, I think Jacksonville regresses. I think Tennessee stays bad. Um, and we had already talked. I mean, the Chargers are the one that I think can kind of throw it out there, but the Colts were definitely the hardest for me to keep out.
It is interesting. We all left out Cleveland. I thought somebody would put the Browns in. We all left them out, all three of us. And if I'm looking at this right, we all left out Jacksonville as well. And we all left out Indianapolis. I thought there was more of a mix than that. Now, we had a
Mm-hmm.
crazy mix when it came to division winners and who's advancing in the AFC. But when it came to the teams we left out, we were fairly close, all three of us. And that surprised me a little bit. It was tough to leave out Cleveland. The Colts and Jacksonville could make a run at it, but I just need to see it first before I actually put them up against this stacked AFC field. It was really hard for me to leave out the Miami Dolphins. So when you come back down here to my screen, I left them out. That was a tough leave out. That was the one. It basically came down to the Dolphins and the Chargers for me. And I just looked at the Dolphins late in the season. They don't tend to do as well typically. And I also looked at the fact that they lost Robert Hunt off that offensive line and they lost Christian Wilkins off that defensive line. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give the nod to the Chargers. But the Dolphins should be right there, if not in the playoffs, just right there knocking on the door. But the Dolphins, I think, were the toughest to leave out for me. All right, man. Thanks for doing it. What's your final 60 tonight?
My final 60, Ben, as we're covering more and more football. It's my favorite time of year as college football kicks off. So as week 0, as they now call it, starts to kick off this week. I just love college football, whether it's, mismatches in the beginning of the year. Now it seems like every single year, leagues disintegrate, new leagues get added. I'll be interested to see what the West Coast Big Ten turns into and how some of those teams deal with it. And then you always have Coach Prime, and let's see what Colorado can do after, changing your team around every single year for the next couple of years.
See that? And I don't have a final 60 tonight. I wanted to talk about yours there with the college football. I love college football as well. And especially, we don't always get great matchups the first week. Sometimes you get one or two. The first week or so this year, there are some great matchups going on. Texas A&M and Notre Dame is going to be a fun matchup. But there's several, I think 5 or 6 just in the first week and a half alone. So go check it out. Lots of NFL prospects all over the place in those 5 or 6 games. It's going to be a blast. But the entire season, obviously, Shane, you like college football, and I do too. A lot of people are talking a lot about the divisions, the realignment of college football, which I'm not a huge fan of either. A lot of it doesn't make geographical sense, even though it makes money sense. But there are still going to be a lot of good matchups. It's not like these teams are all of a sudden going to start playing, teams from Mars or something. There's still going to be lots of fun regional, traditional matchups, some of them that we haven't seen in a while. They're going to be renewed. And then you're just going to have some cool matchups that maybe don't make geographical sense, but still are going to be fun to watch these teams go at it. The college football season is going to be a blast. It's not ruined. It's different. And it may not be what all of us would like for it to comfortably be, but it's still going to be a lot of fun to watch all these teams play this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing about the divisional changes, like things moving in, are those teams that won their league before and then now have a chance to win the new league they're in. Like, if I'm the Big 12, I am not happy to see Utah. Um, they they are incredibly tough to play at home. They play great defense. Every single year they have a quarterback that they pull out of a dust heap that gets them a couple wins. And then you go against, USC and you embarrass them 2 years in a row. Like they can't match up. And then you look at like now with Texas moving in the SEC, like what do you the South is the king of college football. Whatever, regardless of what anyone wants to say, and I know that Michigan is the defending champion, and they'll have a good team this year. They had a great team last year, but there's no way that you can say that the best college football isn't played in the South. That the SEC it's a arms race, and the fans, the stadiums, the money that's spent on college football in the South is absolutely crazy. And when you see what they go forward with and the money that those football teams can bring into their colleges, you know, 3 more victories for an Ole Miss. You know, if you win the league, what does that mean to all the donors? What does that mean to everything else? What does that mean to Lane Kiffin? You know, like,
Yeah, 100% right. The Utah thing is interesting because I can remember, I know you do too, when they were joining the Pac-10, Pac-12 conference, and everybody's like, I don't know if Utah can handle all this heat over here. And a few people who knew Utah were like, no, I'm pretty sure they can handle it. And
yeah,
it turns out they fit in right away, but then over time they actually came to start being kind of a bully in that conference, physically pushing people around. And then the talent was starting to get better and better and better. So
mhm,
there's no problem for Utah coming over to the Big 12. You mentioned it, and playing those teams. I don't know that it will happen right away because you're going to have the little mini cycles of who's on your team at the time. Watch out. Utah may dominate that conference. It's entirely
mhm.
possible because some of the bullies left already, and Utah may be the top dog in that conference for the next
Mhm.
decade.
Well, I think the big thing that comes out of that too is, and people don't always talk about it, but your recruiting net opens up.
Yeah.
Because if you're Utah and you're all out west, you know,
Mm-hmm.
how many kids are you getting to come up from Texas? How many kids are you getting to come up from Louisiana? Because
Yes.
they know I'm never going to get to play a game where anybody else is really going to see me. I'm going to be on the West Coast. I'm not going to be able to get fans. Now, if you're Utah and you're saying I'm going to play TCU, I'm going to play right here. I'm going to play Oklahoma. You know, I'm going to play these teams, Oklahoma State. Now I can go in and talk to these kids before where I was never an option. Where now I can say like, your sophomore year, we're going to play right here. And then now these kids are like, well, maybe Utah does perk up. And those teams that have done a great job of pulling kids from different regions. The other thing with Utah, they do an amazing job sealing off Hawaii, American Samoa, and getting the Polynesian kids. I mean, a lot of that does have to do
Yes.
with a Mormon background, which Utah isn't the number one Mormon school, but you pull those kids in. And the other thing is with that Mormonism, those kids that go away and then they come back, they're 2 years older. And then this year, when you get a couple extra years built up, now all of a sudden you can hold a pipeline where you're getting kids back to back to back.
That's a great point because I've noticed a lot of those names coming through Utah. I didn't know why. I just knew that they were. But that's a great point. But you're right. They can recruit Los Angeles area if they want to. They're close enough. They can recruit that area, but now they can recruit Texas too. And listen, you can say, well, that goes true for anybody that joins the Big 12. No, it doesn't, because some of those schools suck at recruiting. They're more
Yeah.
technique based, and they're not going to get these recruits no matter where you plant them. Utah is good enough. They've already been bringing through and developing NFL talent at the tight end spot, at the defensive back spot, at the linebacker, at the defensive line, at the offensive line, even fringe talent at the quarterback spot. They have already been doing this for several years now. They are going to bonus up on this. Utah, watch out for Utah. You're 100% right on that. Watch out for them over the next few years. Okay, that's it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We appreciate it. We'll have a great one. See you next week. Bye.